Hello everybody, I'm Gavin and I am the British Bookworm. So if you're new to my channel, thank you for joining me on this video. Basically the idea of the channel originally is just to follow me on the journey of reading 1,000 books to personally educate myself on a vast array of subjects. That's a quick brief. So this review today is a book on climate change. Now, it's very difficult for me to do a lot of videos without going on tangents, and today I'm going to try to avoid it because this is the several takes on this video, and there are numerous books I've read recently on this issue where I have yet to do a successful book review because I keep going on different tangents and I don't feel like I'm doing the topic justice. So the book I'm going to review today is Climate at a Glance for Teachers and Students, the 2022 edition, Facts on 30 Prominent Climate Topics. It's written by Anthony Watts, James Taylor and H. Sterling Burnett, PhD. And they are scientists, and I know Anthony Watts and H. Sterling are scientists. Anthony Watts runs whatsupwiththat.com, which is the most viewed website apparently in the world on climate. Now, I'm going to tell you a few points. So when I bought this book, I saw it on Amazon and I bought it because I thought it sounded like something for college and students at school. And as we know that the mainstream follow a set narrative, I believe that this was going to be completely pro man-made, anthropogenic climate change, and man is destroying the planet. Gas, CO2 is poison, and we are all doomed in 10 years. So I bought it with the understanding that it was going to come at it from that point of view of the conversation. So I was very surprised when I read it, but it wasn't. I didn't know until after reading it who Anthony Watts was. And yeah, so that basically was the genuine reasons to purchasing this tidy book. It's probably a 5-hour read or something around 5 hours. It's only very short, but each point is very succinct and it's based on science. So what is it saying? Well, it touches 30 key points, as the title suggests, which explains common conceptions of climate change, which alarmists, activists, eco-activists, politicians, and bureaucrats spout out perpetually on the YouTube videos, on the news, on Sky News, BBC, ITV, you know, all the different news channels all over the planet. And in short, it shows you how orchestrated the movement is, because when you actually look at the facts, you only get that if you are studying this topic. At the moment, I've spent over 500 hours studying climate change over a long period of time, more so now by reading books on the topic. Now, it's difficult to do this YouTube channel knowing that people only want to watch entertaining videos. And I hope that some of my videos I watch back and I don't like watching myself for a start, as most people don't like. But I'm more interested about the content that I'm trying to provide you who's at home now listening to me talk. The 30 major topics cover things from ocean rise, heat spells, ice melt, and the likes of that. Originally, when I did this video, I read out a lot of the pages and it were like 50 minutes long. So I'm going to come to quite a short video today because I just can't bother doing a long one. So if you are a neutral person to this topic, if you have suspicions on the climate change movement, the Greta Thunbergs, Bill Gates, the Clintons, you know, you name all these people, the government, the IPCC, if you have suspicions on that topic, or these institutions, people, organisations, but you find it a bit baffling, then this would be a good place to start, because it's only some tiny book. It's only meant to be like a very easy to digest book, but it has the science. Now, when you look at the actual facts on this topic and you delve into it with some depth, it's very, very difficult. I'm finding it personally very difficult to not get quite emotionally angry and vehemently, passionately mad about it. Because the more I study on it, the more I listen to scientists who don't agree with the mainstream view, the more I have listened to argumentation, debates, the more books I'm reading on it, the more I find it difficult to not get very angry about this topic. Because, and this is key, most of the Western society have so much going on in their own individual lives. We don't have time. And the government and these people that press these agendas know this, by the way. We don't have the time when we're worried about our kids' education and our personal issues, paying our own bills, going to work, trying to keep the family happy. None of us have time to go into a subject with much time or investment, because we are living on a tightrope. Now, having said that, the elite, the governments of this world, including the British government, deep down they all know on a scientific level, a sociological level, and a psychological level how human beings work. So having said all that, governments and institutions and people in places of power and decision know that all of us are basically walking our lives on a tightrope, and we are not in a position necessarily to look at subjects in depth, so we can't self-inform. And on the contrary, many of us are brought up to trust in institutions, in the news, in the organisations, in some politicians are okay mindset, where we follow and listen to people who have great confidence on camera, in debates, in chat shows, in interviews. And we listen to them and we basically trust their views on topics if they believe in topics like climate change, for an example, or in more accurate in a more accurate statement in man-made effects on global warming. So, because I'm a sad guy, I read a lot, I study subjects, I spent over maybe even 1,000 hours. I mean, obviously I'm not recording it, but maybe even 1,000 hours of watching debates on over a course of 15 years. So my standpoint on it is everybody needs to get informed, because so this book would be a really good starting point. Even though it's mainly addressing a Northern American audience, the scientific data in it are mostly in relation to the whole planet, or the Northern Hemisphere in a lot of cases. So I'm going to push you to a channel called Tom Nelson and Tony Heller. Now, those who believe in it, those who are extremists and zealots, I'm not saying everyone's a zealot and an extremist who believe it, but those extremists, again, I'm being very careful not to use the same language rhetoric that the other side use. But those people who believe in it, because they're good people and they want to save Earth and they want us all to have a future, those people who are activists and zealots, who are communists, Marxists and socialists, equal warriors, green people, they all have a certain degree of motivation that is disingenuous to the topic. What do I mean by that? I'm going on a tangent again. But we all innately have our views on things, and things around us can help us exacerbate, magnify our own views on things and how we feel about things. So, for example, people who are in socialists, Marxist, socialist, communist, they love the idea of the centralizations of power to deal with global warming, which is, by the way, the agenda behind it, without doubt, in my opinion. They're using something that's so disastrous that they want to bring all the power into a central point where they can dictate to all nations how they address their policy of food, energy, environmentalism, and control nations rather, not national, but control nations and international policy through a centralized power base. And that's why people who are more inclined, in this example, communists, are more likely to support environmentalism and the idea of man-made climate change. So my point is, people who jump on this topic and believe it vehemently, and think people like me, and even people who are doctors and PhDs and absolute experts of the highest pedigree that walk the earth, you know, it'd be like equivalent to having somebody like Stephen Redgrave, if you know him, who won 5 Olympic medals in rowing and in the British athletics. It'd be equivalent of somebody like him talking about how to train for rowing, and someone coming along going, he doesn't know what he's talking about. There's that guy over there who's won 2 Olympic medals, or that's the kind of topic destruction that goes on in this conversation. We have the most highest degrees in sense of scale, pedigree scientists who don't believe what you see on the news, who don't believe, and even, I'm jumping around, but even those scientists who formulate that hold that thought a second, that formulate the IPCC, many of them don't agree with how they talk about it eventually when they put all the data together. So that means their scientific inquiries haven't formulated the opinions the summarizations form, and then the media jump on the summarizations and then they basically lie. They lie out of their backsides. And people who have families and children and jobs and careers, and they have all the stresses of day-to-day life, cannot formulate the truth, cannot find the truth. They just basically, again, due to their own biases of education, culture, upbringing, they have views that they jump on that sound better because it's easier, and that guy's a scientist and he works for the IPCC, so he must be telling the truth. There's these tens of thousands of scientists who are all at work on this. Why would they all be lying? And that again is a disingenuous soundbite or phrasing of a conversation within it. There's all these scientists that are believing in it on a mass scale, and they are all formulating this opinion, which then the media are portraying in a certain way. And then you've got Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, all forming these opinions. But they are so, even if you look at the scientific data, and I've looked at it via listening to and reading experts who have reviewed it, it doesn't even remotely state the emergency. The term emergency, I believe, was in, I might be wrong on what report, the IPCC 6th report, or the 5th report, I think it stated in an emergency in one sense in the whole of the topic, over thousands of words. And the activists, alarmists, and journalists jumped on that, and the summarization. What I'm going to recommend, though, is this book as a starting point. It gets a 3 out of 5 because it doesn't cover enough depth, but it's meant to be a quick read. So it's a very, very good starting point. Now, I've gone on a bit about some things, but it's important and relevant for the conversation around the topic this book covers. Now, there are a few things I'm going to say to you here, which are some of the scientific facts covered in the book. Take this or leave it. But as someone who's now looking at multiple sources to these statements or to these ideas, I feel fairly confident that what I'm saying is correct. Now, I'm a very open-minded human being. And if you've looked at my other reviews, I've spent a tremendous amount of my own time because because I don't have certain commitments that other people have, and I also believe education is a priority, I commit myself to learning a lot about things. And I've said this in other videos, and I don't like saying things like this because it feels very arrogant, and it makes me uncomfortable saying things, and when I watch these videos back, try and check the content, I don't feel comfortable. But I'm going to say it because it's a fact. Compared to most people, when I research things, compared to most people, and I've met thousands of people in my careers and jobs and things, I know that I invest a tremendous amount of more research than other people. And if I'm talking to the average person out on the street in the city or whatever, and we're having a conversation, and they have slight different views, and I say, well, how much time have you studied? And well, quite a lot. Most people will say, well, I've studied it a lot as well. I know for certainty, as God is my witness, that on most cases within that kind of situation, I've spent 100 times more time studying this topic, which doesn't mean I'm right, but the point I'm making is my own investment in trying to seek the truth. So whether it's religion, whether it's personal training, I spend a tremendous amount of time trying to get to the heart of the subject. So what I'm trying to get across by stating that is, when I'm doing these videos, even if I might not come across 100% confident like a George Galloway or, you know, a Joe Rogan or whatever, whoever you want to look at, I do study this topic to the nth degree. And it really annoys me how people think that they do when I know that they don't, and they say that they do, and rather having some humility and say, well, I've read one book or I've watched a few documentaries on it. Just be honest, you know, do you know these facts? And to move on to my point, people in Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, while they may, and activist organisations, while they may research this topic, their research, without doubt, is very biased to the topic, and they go into fundamentalist material, which makes them be so extreme. And the reason why I can state that, right? Sorry for itching my face. The reason why I can state that is, with me, I watch and read a very broad base. And anyone with any sincere, genuine, in-depth research on this topic of man-made climate change, global warming, without doubt, anyone with genuine research on this topic would never come to extreme views on this as a thesis, or the thesis of the topic. Never. Because the science doesn't state that. And when they go on national television saying the world is going to fry, we are going to all be frying, they're using that language because they know that it basically triggers off emotions, and they're using it like the Democrats use the race card, as Candace Owens says in America. They use the race card to trigger black people because black people are terrified of the misinjustice, rightfully the misinjustice of judging due to the 1960s mindset of racism and white supremacy, which was a terrible and horrific thing in that sense. But people still fear that. So people are terrified due to Hollywood movies, due to, you know, local environmental issues, of losing nature, the planet and the world due to stupid men's activities. But there are truths with that, which is another topic altogether. Environmentalism is actually totally different to climate change, and many people don't even think about that as an actual statement of fact. Environmentalism has lost trillions of pounds across the planet, I would say, trillions of pounds onto the nonsense of man-made climate change. And this is where I'm going to close off this video. I absolutely, certainly mean this to you. If you watch this video and you believe in the extreme alarmism, I beg you to open up your mind to research this topic on a much more broad scale of information, fact-finding. I beg you. If you are one person that sympathizes with Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, or even the IPCC, I beg you to look at other people and the other experts who have PhDs and lifelong careers of impeccable form, by the way, who, like Stephen Redgrave, would not be. You would listen to Stephen Redgrave if he were giving you fitness advice. If you bumped into him in the gym after winning 5 Olympics over 25 years, you would listen to that man. And I'm just using him as one example, but you wouldn't listen to Richard Lidson, or William Happer, or Freeman Dyson, or Judith Curry, or Stephen Koonin. All these world-class scientists, you wouldn't listen to them when they're saying it's not quite as bad as they're making out. We don't really understand how much percentage of warming is man-made. The consensus is just totally fabricated. These are things that are just fact. One more thing I'm going to finish off on. Bear in mind what I said in regards to the fact we all have limited time, we all have limited interest, and the reason, but just hold that a second, the reason why this is so extremely triggering for me and important is the politicians and the elite are pushing forward extremely. I'm judging whether I'm saying this right, because I don't want to, devalue by my language what I'm saying. They are pushing an extremely evil agenda forward. And I'm just going to state that. That is what they're doing. They are going to ruin many of our lives and put as many of us which are already suffering in the West into poverty because of the green taxation on carbon emissions and carbon emission industries. We're now being pushed into an extremely bad scenario, which all clever people in the world that are worth listening to don't agree with. And it terrifies me how literally backboneless these politicians are. There's no politicians out there who are arguing against this green moronacy, if that's even a word. And it's actually really terrifying when you look into this topic with a level-headed, open-minded, self-educated point of view. It is actually chilling. Not only use COVID as an example, how brain dead people are on a mass society scale, but how brain dead people are on just listening to authorities or people who seem to be in positions of authority and trusting them. The IPCC are a corrupt organisation. If you look into that organisation, you will find that it is a corrupt organisation with fantastic scientists working within it. But the actual organisation has a mandate which is corrupt and is the very opposite, the word's not in my mind, the very opposite of what real science should be. But that isn't to say the scientists working within it are fantastic people. But that's just one example that, unless you delve into this topic, you will have no idea of. You will have no idea that Greta Thunberg and her strike was orchestrated. And it is just not factual. It was an orchestrated propaganda campaign to push a movement forward. I could go on. And again, I'm not even wasting my time explaining to you. If you think this is all crackpot conspiracy, I'm not going to waste my time, because you are ill informed if that's your view. But this book would be a fantastic start point to get to grips with some of the facts. And there are many. So, like, for example, food crops are at the highest growth in I'll read the takeaways. Global crop yields have set new records almost every year as our planet has modestly warmed. US crop yields have continued to grow, setting new records nearly every year. Longer growing seasons, higher temperatures, and greater concentrations of atmospheric carbon dioxide are creating ideal crop conditions. But yet, if you see people representing in Britain, in UK, stockpile on telly when they get invited on these stupid chat shows and stuff, they'll say that we're going to have starvation on mass scale on the planet. And it's just nonsense. It really is nonsense, and it really triggers me. It really triggers me. It makes me fuming that we're being pushed into this kind of situation where individual freedoms or your freedoms are being impacted. You can't even comprehend the decisions and choices and laws and rules and ideas that people that they don't have to explain themselves to you, but their decisions are affecting you. The things that they are doing affect you. And this is what really makes me extremely effing angry about the IPCC scientists, because many of them, from my own research, know what's going on. But because they want to stick to their careers, and literally their careers will be decimated, and they might have been working for 20 years in their career and be very respected. And if they speak out about the summarization formula of the IPCC reports, they'll lose a career, and they know it. You have to only listen to a few of Tom Nelson's guests about Michael Mann to realize what a piece of crap that man is. Polar bears. Polar bear populations have increased dramatically during recent decades, despite the modest global warming that has occurred over the same period. The estimated polar bear population has nearly quadrupled since 1950, rising from 10,000 bears in 1950 to as many as 39,000 bears today. Polar bears evolved between 6 million years ago and 350,000 years ago, and they survived and even thrived in much warmer climates than we're seeing today. Just going to read a few more for you before I go. US heat waves. In recent decades in the United States, heat waves have been far less frequent and severe than they were in the 1930s. The all-time high temperature records set in most states occurred in the first half of the 20th century, that's the 1930s. The most accurate nationwide temperature station network implemented in 2005 has shown no sustained substantial increase in daily high temperatures in the United States since its inception. Urban heat islands. Urban heat islands, which grow with the size of cities, create artificial warming at many long-term temperature stations. On average, urban heat islands increase the global surface temperature trend by almost 50%. Nearly 90% of the US temperature stations have been compromised by urbanization effect. About half of the reported US warming effectively disappears in the data. This is where it's key. About half of the reported US warming effectively disappear in the data when analysis consider only those stations that have not been corrupted by heat islands. So basically, I have ground temperature stations that they use. I think there's something like 9,000 or something all over the planet. But they use them in America. I think there's some around 3,000 or something like that in America, but I might be wrong. And many of them are corrupted data because the environment is changing the actual heat that they're monitoring by in some cases, the 1 degree of warming, which the activists and alarmists and even the IPCC say we've warmed 0.8 or 0.12 of a degree since the industrialization or the industrial era started or whatever. Excuse me. So that's what that's in regard to. Tornadoes. The number of tornadoes in the United States has been declining for the past 45 years. That's the format of the graph, by the way. It's not a made-up statement. It's got all those as actual proof of it's been scientific based in the book. The number of strong tornadoes rated F3 or higher have been dramatically declining for the past 45 years. In 2017 to 2018, the United States set a record for the longest period in history without a death caused by a tornado. In 2017 to 2018, the United States set a record for the longest period in history without an F3 or stronger tornado. According to a climate report by the United Nations, there is low confidence in the observed trend in a small spatial scale phenomena such as tornadoes. Sea level rise. I'm going to finish on this one, because this one I find is the biggest irony of them all. One of the many. Global sea levels have risen more than 400 feet since the beginning of the interglacial period. You need to learn about interglacials if you want to know more about this. And the data show they have always risen between ice ages. Sea levels have been rising at a fairly steady pace since at least the mid-1800s. NASA's satellite instruments with readings dating back to 1993 show global sea levels rising at a pace of nearly 1.2 inches per decade, so every 10 years. Tide gauge data going back to the 1850s show a much lower rate between 0.8 and 0.9 inches per decade with no hint of acceleration. So I'm already at 30 minutes, which I didn't want to be. So if you've liked this video, give us a like and subscribe to my video. Understand that education has to be self-education because that's the best form of education, because institutions and organisations and teachers outside in the world have their own ideas and bias, and you have to understand that by finding and discovering your own soul-searching and seeking of truth, you find that many people in the world are corrupt and many institutions and organisations are corrupt. And only by looking into your own heart and really trying to seek the truth, by opening up your mind to a vast array of subjects and knowledge, do you discover that the world isn't quite what it's being told or taught or said to be by universities and doctors and PhDs, and that truth is a very difficult one to find. And only by searching it with tenacity, you get to find that the world is not quite the way it's being represented. So if you like this video, you know what to do. And I hope that this has at least given you some idea that this topic, from a person that's just a layman who's looked at it for 500 to 1,000 hours at the moment, maybe, you know, roughly in somewhere in that ballpark, that it isn't what we're being told. Then you've got to ask you the question, why are we not being told the truth? See you later.